Okay. Okay, evening all. Okay, I thought we could go over some games from the British Championship again. Garwin Jones actually scored the same as Stephen Gordon. It was the tiebreak which separated them. I thought Stephen Gordon played some brilliant games in the British Championship just gone a few weeks ago. So here is one game against another Grandmaster, not too far away on FIDE rating. So Daniel Gormally, whose nickname sometimes in the past has been Gormalizer, he's been a very dangerous Grandmaster. So Stephen had the white pieces against him. Is everything okay on stream? Board? Just want to check that as well. Nope. I just wanted to make sure on the okay, there's a few more people coming on Play Chess. So Stephen Gordon, at the time of this game, he was 2-5-3-9, and Gormally 2-5-0-5, and the game started with 1d4. Okay, and Gormally played knight f6, flexible first move, and we saw actually a King's Engine and okay, I wonder if the chat on stream is working at all today. It doesn't seem to. Why isn't this working? Okay, weird. Okay, we saw a King's Engine, g6, knight c3, or rather, no, it's something else. It's not directly King's Engine. It's a very quick c5 here in this position, striking at the centre. Okay, I think I'm going to stop and start the broadcast thing. That seems to be in the chat. Don't know what's going on here. Ah, okay, there is something. Okay, so we carry on. So d5 was played here, and can we just quickly? Can we just start again? I'm just gonna go to the first move. Okay, so Stephen Gordon's white. So we get a position with c5, d5, bishop g7. Now e4, d6. So it looks as though okay, white's got a space advantage. But black's got the usual undermining opportunities, maybe b5 later, or e6. Now here white chooses knight ge2, so that gives the idea that knight g3 might be useful. With knight g3 it's protecting e4, and also maybe h4 h5 could be useful in the future. Okay, black castled anyway, knight g3, and okay, if white's plan is something crude like this, or you know h4 h5, that could be quite dangerous for the black king's safety. Black reacted now maybe against this with this move h5, but black is kind of weakening his own king position a little bit as well. It's a bit controversial. And after bishop e2 he carries on actually with h4. It's very aggressive play from black, kicking the knight back, and now another pawn with h3. So this is kind of surprising position where this h pawn's being flung down. So what do you guys think of this strategy from black? It's a 2500 GM playing in this manner. Do you think black is justified. He has stalled the advance of this H pawn, which could have been dangerous in this variation. What do you think? Do you think it's justified? We'll carry on with the game anyway. Okay, so here white played G4. So potentially now there's G5 gaining a bit of space, and also the knight can come to G3. So it still looks kind of a pleasant position for white. But now black tries to break open the centre. He plays E6, and now knight G3, and now he opens that centre and plays A6. So he's going to strike with B5, it seems, soon. White clamps down on B5, so white plays A4 to clamp down on B5. Then we have knight Bd7, and okay, has black got any dark square control here to compensate for anything? Is this pawn going to be weak in the future? There's a few questions really. White castles here and now knight E5. So this pawn, it seems, doesn't really want to go forward. If it goes forward, then maybe, you know, something like knight H7 could be good. Possibly. What white has to be a bit careful. What he did actually is play move F3. So actually, if I give you 20 seconds here, can you tell me who you prefer as white? Do you prefer white or black? If you want to try and evaluate this position here, how many of you prefer white or black? Oh, some of your streams said black. Hard Toddy and Zimvingy. Black? Really? You prefer black here, do you? I mean white. Forget what engines think. Okay. And PlaySpree has asked, why would white castle short? Doesn't make any sense. Well, I think the king's kind of safe here on the king side, the white king. Okay. So black, let's continue the game. Black played rook E8, just wanted to try and stimulate thought here. And then we see this curious move, rook A3 actually, which might be protecting F3 in the future, or it's protecting the rook against B5. Rook's securer than on here. Queen C7, another move King H1. And now rook B8, as if black might be interested vaguely in playing B5 at some point, but now we see G5 finally played, knight H5. And now not taking on H5, white actually invites black to double the pawns here by playing the move F4, kicking that knight away from E5 before it gets a chance to use the G4 square. Actually, if white had played knight takes H5, then maybe this is a nice hook for the G4 square. So F4, knight G4, and this could be quite useful to black. So really, what white did here is just play F4. He's getting rid of black's best piece, isn't he? This knight on E5 is one of black's best pieces, but he's getting his pawns doubled. Okay, the knight goes back, and then we see bishop d3. So black's been driven back, and actually the position doesn't seem to have that much counterplay on offer for black, because without that e5 square and the b5 break, where is black's counterplay in fact? And maybe worryingly is f5 and f6 might be dangerous, striking at the structure here, which has been weakened with that h pawn coming down. That g6 is actually less solid than maybe it should be. It seems at this point black seems to go a little bit wild now by playing b5. Plays b5 anyway. So what's the point of this? A takes, knight takes, an exchange sacrifice is now played. And now c4, so has black generated counterplay? It's not particularly convincing here. Although d5 you might think could be vulnerable in the future. The king's here, and that could be vulnerable. But this next move, bishop e2, has the idea maybe bishop f3 would hold up d5. So we see now queen c5, bishop f3, and now black trying to really put more pressure on d5 with knight b6. So if he can play bishop b7 and try and get that pawn, that might be something. But white plays now energetically, well, challenges the rook, trying to get on black's back row, and the king here is looking a bit precarious. We see now also this pawn being offered, which would in theory protect the rook, so that is taken, protecting the rook. But is there a problem with it? White exchanges off rooks and plays now king h2. Okay, so again the black queen returns to sort of put pressure on d5. Bishop e2 now, sorry, queen e2 now is played, and we see in this position that if knight takes pawn, I think just bishop takes will do, because of the queen check winning the bishop on c8. So okay, queen e2, black plays now bishop f5, and here it looks as though maybe the bishop's got a useful square here with this pawn, and these bishops are not so bad, and this pawn could be dangerous, and maybe this knight can even come to a4 as well as putting pressure on d5. But here though we see g4 being played, inviting bishop d3, and now queen f2 looks a bit sneaky actually. It's eyeing b6, and it's also giving access to h4. So you can imagine now if this knight ever moved, say to take this pawn, then we might get check, and that's really dangerous. For example, like this, or like this, could be very dangerous as well. It looks as though there's some big problems here for black with that pin. Black blocked the a file now with knight a4. Actually, shall we work that out? Let's work that out rather than speculating. Knight takes d5, so we'll throw in this check and we'll play bishop f8. Can anyone see a kind of crushing blow here for white? If I give you 20 seconds, what would you play here in this position? What would be the most incisive approach? So 20 seconds starting from now. Any ideas? Okay, someone's mentioned queen d4, which looks good. Someone's mentioned queen h4. Rapi 452 on play chess, queen h4. Here forever, queen h4. plays to be queen d4. So let's look at queen d4 versus queen h4. I think queen d4 for me looks like a beautiful queen, actually. For example, you know, knight b4, there's queen d6 here. Knight b6, there might be rook b8 here. That would be embarrassing. So I think queen d4 has more flexibility to it. It's attacking a lot of squares. If we go queen h4, I think queen h4 doesn't look, to me, intuitively, as effective as queen d4. Although you are threatening queen h6, yes, that is a bit of a dangerous threat. But I don't know, this square, if queen b6 can sort of eye this square, so there's no time for, you know, there's queen f2. Mind you, and that pawn makes itself felt. So I think queen d4 actually, if this was the case, I think for me queen d4. Okay, but let's move on in the game. So knight a4, and now actually the knight was just kicked with bishop d1, just kicking that knight back, and it didn't want to go back. Funny enough, right? We saw actually queen takes d5. So black's crumbling, it seems here. Or has he got this sneaky idea in mind? After rook takes a4, he plays bishop d4. The queen is eyeing g2 here, so the queen's got to defend g2. An inadequate defence would be bishop e3, I think, because you just then take on e3, and then it will be mate, justify that h pawn. But white in this position actually played a really strong move. And this is the final move of the game. Can you guess what white played in this position if I give you 15 seconds? So the final move played. Okay, white. Okay, I'm going to show you. Okay, if there's no guesses. Well, white's a rook up anyway. Okay, so bishop f3 just is crushing here. There's nothing really black can do now. He's a rook down, and also not only that, the check here might be dangerous. For say queen h4, king's also in trouble in some variations. So okay, let's do a quick overview and summary. So it was a game which the grandmaster opponent didn't seem to get much counterplay. It seems an aggressive advance, but with this e takes, by the way, that kept the pawn structure symmetrical. And maybe was better than CD, because then the b5 break is more difficult to achieve from black, because both pawns are locking down on b5. You imagine if this had taken like that, but there's a real lockdown on b5 here. So castles, and then we saw black not really having much fun in this game position. Minimal counterplay, and he played for this b5. It looked as though f5 was really dangerous anyway. So this didn't seem to work out, this exchange sack, and it was unfortunate for Daniel Gormally to not get much of a game there, but he did have the black pieces, and sometimes that thing sort of happens, not having counterplay. So let's have a look at another game now. So this one is against do I really want that one? Okay, Stephen Gormally. Yep. Okay, against Simon Rowe. Now I think Simon Roe is, if it's the Simon Roe I know, he's plays in one of my local leagues, the Hearts League, unless I've got him confused with another person. So the opponent here is 2275. Stephen, Grandmaster as white, 2539, plays d4, and Simon plays d5, and we see c4 e6, which is a solid system to play if you're playing a Grandmaster, I guess. But actually, after knight f3, the Tarrasch, trying to get counterplay with the Tarrasch defense. We see black now potentially with an isolated queen's pawn coming up. g3, very popular against Tarrasch. After bishop g2, black commits to c4, okay, which offers later the possibility of playing b3 to white, and white quite quickly actually does play in this position. Now bishop b4 was played, curiously, which looks a bit unusual actually, to play bishop b4. I don't know how many of you would have played bishop b4 here. So what would be the idea of that? First of all, can I ask, are you surprised with bishop b4? Just a yes or no would do, instead of say knight f6 or bishop e7. If I give you a few seconds to answer that, just 10 seconds. Is it surprising to see bishop b4? Is this? I'm not really sure on Tarrasch defense theory. Is it a theoretical move? Bishop b4, yeah. Does anyone know? And we'll swiftly move on. Okay. Alright, we're going to move on. Okay, so b3 is played, cb, queen takes b3, and now knight ge7. So that's the idea. The knight can come here instead of here. The bishop's not in the way. The bishop maybe can reroute or something, or go back here. Okay, bishop a3, offering the exchange of the dark square bishops. Black takes, white takes, and now we see black castling, knight d2. Okay, so from this it seems that white has nice pressure here, and maybe a rook coming to b1 or c1, maybe the use of the c5 square. Okay, bishop e6, knight b3 looks like a natural move to put a knight on c5 here. That's stopped with b6, but it does weaken a bit the light squares. Pressure on the c file now, f6, and we see now knight e1. So where is this knight wandering? Is it going to wander here or here? From there it can go to there. Okay, a5, e3. Safeguarding d4 just in case black wants to dislodge this knight, and d4 be loose. Knight b4 is now played. The queen goes back, knowing that the knight's covering d3 at the moment. So you can evict this knight. Is b6 going to be a bit loose on that b file? Queen d6, bishop f1. Now we see bishop f5. Knight d2, as though maybe a3 could be on the cards, possibly. Rook ab1. No, but actually a really nifty move actually here. Forget a3. This b5 square is good to use positionally, and guess what amazing positional move was played in this position. If you want to try and tap into the weakness of b5, so how would you do that in this position? If I gave you 20 seconds starting from now, it looks like a nice positional move. So guess the move here. Okay, there's been two suggestions, bishop b5 and a4, so they both kind of do something with b5, yes. a4 or bishop b5, interesting. Anything else? Anything else? Nothing else. Nothing else is relevant for b5. No? You want to celebrate b5? What else is relevant for b5? If I give you a clue, Karpov, actually someone mentioned it, Zvena, okay, knight b1 to c3, yeah, he plays knight b1. This retreat, the knight can come to b5. Okay, so after rook fc8 we see knight c3, so that b5 square is pretty nice. King h8, now the knight's kicked, okay. And now before knight b5, actually this c file White would want to have more pressure there. He plays bishop a6, gets the rook away, and again he's not immediately playing knight b5, he plays queen e2, okay, which does strengthen control of b5, so White's really conquered that b5 square. Knight a7, or has he? So knight d3 now is played. And what is the idea of knight d3 here? Well, maybe knight d3 blocks that bishop, so maybe something like this one now will be good on b6. Black now takes the opportunity to play b5 here, but he's weakened c5. So, and he's also attacking the bishop, of course, making it more lucrative to play this b5. Here White plays knight c5 just in time, just protecting that bishop and using that c5 square. Queen b6. Rook a2 here now, and it looks as though this is the way of bypassing the bishop to put pressure on b5 again. So it would have 1, 2, 3, 4 on b5 here. So the pawn is encouraged forward. It's taken. Now knight c to a4. Queen goes to c6. Now knight b3, kicking the queen again, protecting the rook, and kicking the queen again. And now the other knight uses c5, so we've got now protection on that bishop. We've got a weakened b4 pan and a fantastic knight on c5. The knights protecting each other nicely. So this positional weaving around is a bit Karpovian. It looks a bit Karpovian to me. I don't know about you guys. So what has White achieved? This grip on the position is huge here. Queen f3, okay, knight b5. Maybe a bit of counterplay, you might think. Well, it's snapped off here to get an infiltration now, swapping one advantage for another. This rook on the 7th could actually put pressure on the king side now. And okay, but surely the rook can be evicted here, you might ask, with knight c6. Okay, White to play now. So he's played very positionally to reinforce a knight on c5. Guess what White plays in this position if I give you 20 seconds starting from now. White to play here. Anyone? White to play. If you want to play chess, please hide the move score tab. Go to the opening book tab, by the way. to have these guess the move competitions, quizzes. No, not Rook C7. No. I'll give you a clue. What do I often like? Look. What kind of sacrifice would I look for often on my YouTube channel? That's a clue. No, come on. We want an exchange sacrifice. How do we get an exchange sacrifice? Anyone? Okay, Rook takes G7 is played. Rook takes G7 because he's already on F5. If the bishop moves, then there's Queen F6. So this is taken. Okay, so this is taken. Queen takes F5. So he's got a pawn for the exchange. He's threatening knight E6 check. Rook D6. Knight E6 check. And the king's in grave danger. It can't go back now because Queen F6 mating on G7. So big trouble. King F7. Now, a clever little tactical move in this position is played. Queen move. Queen takes H7, offering the knight, because now knight C5 check is winning the queen. The queen has to take care. Queen takes, D takes. Black plays on a bit. So it's two rooks for the queen, but you know, exchange up here, and this passed pawn has to be dealt with. Maybe we see Queen D3, Rook D7, Rook A1, which looks to be heading for pinning the knight here. Rook C7, Rook A6. Not only that though, we've got this B6 square. This pawn you can dislocate the pawn with Rook B6, and just in time now, well, White plays Queen B5, so it's got that pawn sorted. So it's gone now. So Black resigned here. So it's quite a positional game, and then there was some tactics after. So let's have a quick look at that. So how to beat the Tarrasch. A very interesting positional struggle where Black lost control of that C5 square as it goes, not the B5 square, it was actually the neighbouring square. And then we saw this temporary invasion on the 7, which then we saw an exchange sack, which actually ended up winning material, and then Black's pawn was dealt with effectively. Okay, so let's go on to another game. Now another Grandmaster opponent, this time Matthew Turner. Okay, Matthew Turner was playing white, so we're going to flip the board. Stephen Gordon's black, so D4, and we saw actually Trompovsky territory. A few years ago there was a Grandmaster called Julian Hodgson who won the British about 3 or 4 times with this system, Trompovsky. I think he created quite a few videos about it as well, winning with the Trompovsky. So Grandmaster Stephen Gordon was black here, 2539. Matthew Turner 2508. So not too much difference in FIDE ratings. So this was the British Championship, by the way, in August, 2nd of August. This game. We saw here in this position D5. White plays E3. Now knight E4. Bishop F4, and now C5. Bishop D3. This looks all fairy in Trompovsky. Black sacrificing a pawn. He's going to play like E5 and try and win this pawn back. That knight's pinned. See check, and now black plays a6. White gives up the light square bishop, and white is giving back the pawn, but he's going to try and get that d4 square and pressure on the dark squares. So he gives back the pawn. Okay, white castles, e6. So white's plan is a dark square grip, it seems, and that's kind of implied by the next move, a3, because it looks as though, you know, this is going to be handy to get this dark square grip. And we see after bishop e7, knight a4, queen tucks back on a7. It's eyeing that diagonal. It's still in control of c5, c4. Okay, and this implies that maybe, you know, the c file is going to be good, and c5 can be celebrated. Black castles, rook c1. So at this point in the game, do you prefer white or black in this position? If you were to evaluate here, if I gave you 20 seconds starting from now. Anyone? Black? Someone prefers black here forever? Okay. Anyone else? I think black might be doing okay. I'm not totally sure. Okay. In the game, bishop d7 was played here. White took on d5, and black actually left voluntarily the c pawn, which you might think is a bit odd. He played knight d5. So he's leaving his c pawn. Maybe he thinks he can use this c pawn, even with this glaring rook on the c file. Bishop e5, and now c5, and he is hitting now this knight on a4, knight f4, and now the resourceful rook fd8. So this pressure is useful in these variations now. White takes on d5 here, funny enough, and of course his knight's kind of loose. He plays now b4, so he's trying to get into that b4 square, which looks fair enough. f6, bishop f4, bishop b5, an annoying kind of move, hitting the rook, and that rook moves, and now we see time for c4, but the pawns are fixed, aren't they, on knight squares. Knight c3, queen b7, protecting d5, queen g4, and now bishop e8. If there's any check, now there's bishop f7. e4 though is played, and here perhaps interestingly, black doesn't play d4. Now maybe knight d5 is powerful in this position. It's a supported knight, and possibly this is great for white. Black dissolved his d pawn by taking on e4. Knight takes e4, and we've got this pawn which might be useful. Rook ac8, knight g3. It looks as though knight f5 is dangerous. Bishop f8, bishop e3. Okay, c3, knight e4. Direct threat now, knight f6. And wow, Stephen plays a surprising move, which, if you remember, there's a YouTube video recently from the 4 NCL. He played a surprising move like this in the 4 NCL. It's a really surprising move to play here. Can you guess it if I give you 20 seconds starting from now? Anyone? It's not bishop h5, no. I don't know, bishop h5. Oh, bishop h5's got some logic to it. No, bishop h5 would fail, I think, to knight takes f6 check, because then you just take on here. No, he plays f5. White takes on f5, and now we see bishop g6. So what does White do about this knight? He plays the check. The bishop goes back. The queen now is a bit awkward. He plays the g4, going straight into a pin. Now I wonder about this. He goes straight into this pin here. I wonder about bishop. If you know, say in this position, White had played queen f5. What would be? Is there a really strong move for Black here? Does anyone see a strong move for Black? If I give you 20 seconds, I'm not sure myself totally immediately. Strong move for Black. Yeah, rook d5. Okay, a couple of you are saying rook d5. One of you is saying bishop d5. I'm not really convinced about bishop d5. I think rook d5. Let's have a quick look at rook d5. We'll say here queen g4. Then what? Is it so easy? I'm not sure anyway. Okay. Let's go to the game continuation. So the queen did go to g4 and we saw rook c4. And that was reinforced with f3. So White thought maybe this was secure anyway, but now we have c2. So this pawn's dangerous. So really, Black is a pawn down now, and White is potentially, a strong knight here. So what's going on here? Bishop c5 is played now. Black took, and now queen b2, and we saw queen g5 in this position. Check, h6, and now queen d1. It looks as though this pawn is a menace in this position. Although Black has a pawn down, what's going on here with this c pawn? It's like really dangerous. Okay, White tried to calm things down now with knight d6. Black played though now, and this is approaching move 40. Maybe this is like a approaching move 40 blonde on move 39, knight d6, just before the time control. But Black plays now. Can you guess what Black plays here? Black to play and win, basically. It looks as though it's Black to play and win. If I give you 20 seconds here, Black to play forcing move. No, come on. I can't believe two of you said Queen E1. You can't play this because of Queen F7 check, surely. No? Queen takes F7 check. No, come on. Much better as Rook takes D6 first. Then you play Queen takes E1. Much clearer cut. Okay, so you queen the pawn here, and there's a back row issue. Much clearer cut. Okay, so Queen E5, Black's material up, Queen D2, he's a bishop up. He comes back for that pawn, and here White resigned. So I don't know, that game was a bit crazy. It seemed to go a bit crazy. White seemed to be a pawn up, and then that C pawn turned nasty. So I don't know really. It was a dynamic game by Black. So he dissolved his D5 pawn. This F5 is curious. It kind of there's some problems here for White, it seems. Maybe Black was threatening A5 or something to okay, so White seems to go make a few mistakes maybe to get this position. Okay, so shall we have a look at one more game or carry on next week? What would you prefer? It's a bit hot here actually at the moment. I don't know if you want to carry on next week. Yeah. Or should we have a look through one more game? Up to you really, if you want. Okay, a couple of you on play chess, one more. Okay, and you take priority on play chess at the moment. So okay, three of you. Let's have a look at one more game then. Okay. Okay, another Grandmaster encounter. This time with a very solid GM who's very well known for winning endgames in particular. Maybe I should look at his games. Grinds people down to dust. Keith Arkell. Okay, so Keith Arkell was playing White. Now Keith's rating is 2441. Okay, so Stephen Gordon 2539. This was played on the 30th of July 2012. So okay, so Knight F3 was played. Reti, Knight F6, and we transpose now. We get into an English symmetrical almost, but White didn't play E3. No, White played G3. Okay. B6, Bishop Fianchettos. This one poses it. White castles. Bishop E7. So Stephen's setup here looks to be controlling E4. White is playing now, it seems, for E4. He plays Rook E1, so he's going to play E4. A6, E4. So it's a bit hedgehoggy now. Bit of a hedgehog setup from Black. D3, Black castles. A3. And we see Knight C6. Okay. So White might be interested in Rook B1 and B4, and maybe taking or B5 at some point. He plays Rook B1. Then we see Knight D7, and the Knight's vacated that F6 for Bishop F6. This bishop could be useful on the diagonal. B4, Bishop F6. White plays bishop d2, and black plays rook b8. Now this setup with black is not so bad. I think in a lot of blitz games recently I've lost against the English or the Bottleneck because d5, but look at d5 here. These two pawns are controlling a lot of squares in the centre. It's a flexible setup because of this structure. White now plays b5, and black uses that e5 square. He plays knight e5, and of course he's on d3 here. White takes though on a6, hitting the bishop, and actually a non-obvious move is played here. The obvious move might be bishop takes a6, but actually bishop c6 was played. I think the idea is to victimize a3, because you really want like to play this and victimize a3 quickly. You don't want your bishop on a6. Okay, queen c2, and knights come off, and then we see this idea rook a8. So temporary pawn sack, and structure of white is being questioned here. This a3 pawn. So white's done that work to play b4, b5, b takes, and it's all, is it backfiring on the poor a3 pawn here? Knight b5, which does hit d6, but that's ignored. Rook takes a6. He's on that pawn. a4. Now d6 surely is not ignored now. You might ask. Well, actually, it's not threatened. It's not threatened because the bishop's also on a4 here. So bishop d4 is played. Bishop g2. And now bishop takes b5. And white doesn't want maybe a4. No, white doesn't mind rather a4 left as a target. He plays rook takes b5 because maybe he's targeting b6 now. Okay, queen f6, bishop e3, h6, rook goes back. So is this pawn weaker than this one? That's a question for positional gurus. Any positional gurus here? What would you say? Which pawn's weaker? Or should we just find out from the game? Black plays actually g5 here. Okay, if white had the intention of playing f4, that's been discouraged now. h3, king g7, rook f1, as though actually now f4 in the future, maybe after taking, could be on the cards. Queen e5, king h2, and is this provocative? White is now aiming for f4 after king h7 plays f4, and the queen goes back to g7. Okay, rook b e1, black takes on g4, and if white doesn't take with the pawn, then e5 will be good to celebrate. So he takes with the pawn, but now rook g8 looks dangerous. You know, queen g3 check, etc. White takes, and queen g3 check is thrown in first, and then c takes d4. And actually, out of this, we have this knight versus bishop scenario where the knight's actually got that nice c5 square, and a4 is a bit weak, d3 is a bit weak. It looks a bit dangerous for white in this position. Rook e2, and now rook a5 also looks as though this rook could swing in for an attack potentially as well. And I think this causes some panic now for white. White plays e5, which disrupts the rook from swinging across clearly, and he aims for f5 now. So what's the compensation? He's got e4 locked down a little bit, but knight c5, and black is on d3 now, as well as a4. F takes, queen b1. The a pawn's now taken, queen b4, and it looks as though, hold on a second, this is a bit drafty down here. What about things like rook f7? Knight c3, check, queen e6, offers the exchange of queens, which is taken, check, rook goes back, and we head towards this endgame. A bit of a grind this game actually. Takes king g6, but this endgame is better for black. Well, it's a pawn up already for black, and the king is now going to march on the dark squares. King g5, king f4, offering this pawn, king e3. So this pawn, if he gets these pawns going, this is central pawn mobility versus flank pawn. Rook a1, check, check, and we see now that this pawn's going to drop, and these pawns are becoming mobile. King's very aggressive in this endgame. c5 takes, c6, rook gets behind it. Rook e6, e4. These pawns look pretty strong. After e3, white resigns. Bit of a positional grind this game. A grandmaster opponent seems to be outplayed positionally and lost the ending. That's how this game seemed to pan out. Black didn't have any clear, easily exploitable weakness, it seems. There's a nifty bishop c6 here, going into this position where this was curious here, this g5, as if there was going to be some f4 to be prevented, and that happened anyway. But it seems as though it put white's king a bit in danger, especially with this potential rook maneuver. Disruptive pawn sack, and we have an endgame transition where black was doing fine in this endgame, more than fine. This king march on the dark square is giving up both b6 and a6 rather spectacularly. These guys let go of here because he's just interested in these two. This is quite instructive endgame. I think a dynamic endgame position. I don't know how many of you would consider this king march. It sort of reminds me a bit of a Capablanca pawn sacrifice and a rook and pawn ending. So he's offering, he's not bothering defending. He just gives up two pawns here. He just wants to get that d3 pawn, and after that the pawn mobility crashes through. There's a question here. I can't understand why white played 9d3 instead of d4. Can you explain it? If we go back to move 9, in this position d4, well, it's more Botvinnik, isn't it? If Botvinnik's system is you play with this structure because you want to sort of play f4 later in the Botvinnik system. If you play d4, you get sort of a hedgehog position, which is very different, and black can sort of play on like the dark squares, you know, like this, and knight e5, knight c5, or knight d7. It's a hedgehog. It's a different strategy. It's a completely different strategy. It's playable for both sides, but this is more Botvinnik system style to play d3. Is there any other question on this? Okay, if there's no more questions in the next 2 or 3 minutes, I think that's it for this week. I hope you got something from those games. Comments or questions on YouTube when I upload it to YouTube. Okay, have a good week. Thanks very much. See you next week.